Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mobile Application Cranny. This first video, we're going to be talking about apps that we use. So a lot of questions that have come up in different social media spheres and also in education is, what app do I use for this? What app do I use for a population or a certain goal you're trying to reach? But the thing is that with most apps and with most technology is that you can't just straight up use them. They're not all just click and go. And when you're asking what app should I use, it's almost the same thing as asking what instrument do I use. So what you use actually depends on client preference, accessibility, and then your comfort or proficiency on that instrument. And even though apps are something that's on your phone or on your tablet or iPad, apps are actually instruments themselves, just like guitar, piano, vocals, and percussions are instruments that we learn in school.
I'm just curious, that makes me then wonder, what do you feel it is about technology that makes it seem like it's not an instrument and that we are not seeming to overly treat it like an instrument like we would voice or piano or guitar?
I think that because it's not a traditional thing you learn in school, like when you're going into undergraduate, you have to audition on an instrument to get into music school, right? So at this point, you can't really audition on apps or like on tech. And I also think because tech it's a newer thing. It's been growing so fast that it's common now, but it's just,
It's still not mainstream.
yeah, it's not mainstream.
When I think about that, I definitely I find myself having a reaction to it, because I think maybe part of the reason that apps are not being treated as instruments is because they're on something like this size, right? And there's so much that you can pack into that too. It's a little bit overwhelming, but I think y'all are saying, it might seem sort of new in nature, but I think probably the majority of popular music now is electronic or digital influenced in nature. I mean, even going back, hip hop itself is from starting in the 70s. So that's about 50 years of history there. So I actually do agree with what you're saying as far as it not being, I think, honored maybe in academic circles right now, as far as how we audition and how we go through the programming. But I think there's so much potential there and so much room for that is really not only expanding our practice, but also really meeting the needs of the clients that we're working with, who are probably connected to those musical cultures and probably even doing a lot of app-based music making themselves.
Yeah.
And I would say it's just been such a challenge too, with just how quickly, Gabby, as you noted, how quickly technology has changed. And I think just from an academic standpoint, the learning curve just took off so quickly. And I think it's been challenging just for faculty to try to keep up and knowing how to teach their students when it changes, every other year, what apps to use. There's billions of apps now, which is amazing to me. Or not billions, but maybe millions. So I think that's been challenging. Just thinking about when I used to supervise interns and just knowing that several of them had such steep learning curves of not knowing how to use them, outside of, I just pull up YouTube.
Yeah.
It almost makes me think that just we're talking about creating music with apps, there's even just a receptive side of it, listening to music that's created with some of those technologies. And
well, before we go into how to choose it, I want to talk about the different types of apps that there are. So, Jesse, you already mentioned receptive. So, that's the easiest one to use. You just open it, search the song that you're looking for, and you can find it on places like Spotify or Apple Music or YouTube. But apps can also be virtual instruments themselves. They can also be used for creating and recording. There's also games, and there's also apps that can hold, different types of notation. So like Ultimate Guitar, if you're trying to find chords, or On Song, if you're trying to put a bunch of sheets into one file. And for those who are, running businesses or projects, there's also organizational and communicative apps like Slack and Padlet. So there's so many different categories of apps, but also within music therapy, we use music in so many different ways. So it's kind of cool how all of these apps and all of the different experiences they offer can kind of be aligned with everything that we're offering in a music therapy session.
I think just to a few other really unique ways I've seen people using apps, it's also just been for data collection. So I've used a few apps for data collection or data recording that was compliant with like HIPAA or just PHI mindsets. And so, but then I've also seen people who've been using apps for different like action research projects, who've been incorporating into their research. So there's been some really neat, non-traditional, I guess maybe it's not the best term for it, but just other ways of using apps in our work that I think are really exciting too.
Yeah. Innovative. I like that word. Yeah, so with using all of these apps, there's going to be most of the time some sort of learning curve that goes along with it. And there's really no other way to get through the learning curve except for just, sitting with it and becoming proficient in the app just as you would an actual instrument.